Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining, and welcome back to another live session on Declassified Caribbean News and Commentary Network. I hope that you'll be joining shortly. Now, across the Caribbean, millions of people are asking the same question: how much more can ordinary people take? From Jamaica to Barbados, Trinidad and Tobago to Guyana, families are feeling the pressure of rising food prices, higher electricity bills, increasing transportation costs, unaffordable housing, and wages that often struggle to keep pace with inflation. For many, the cost of living is no longer just an economic issue, it has become a daily struggle that affects every aspect of life. Governments point to global inflation, supply chain disruptions, geopolitical conflicts, and the lingering effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. But many Caribbean citizens argue that these explanations are no longer enough. They want to know why prices continue to rise, whether enough is being done to protect consumers, and who should ultimately bear responsibility. This evening, we'll examine the economic realities behind the headlines. Is the Caribbean facing a temporary inflationary cycle, or are we witnessing a deeper structural crisis? How have tourism economies or tourism dependent economies, high import dependence, energy costs, taxation, and currency pressures contributed to the burden on ordinary households? And perhaps most importantly, what policies could provide meaningful relief? Join in the conversation as we explore one of the defining issues facing the region today: the Caribbean cost of living. How much more can people take? Now, this is plans to be a very important conversation because, people are suffering and people are talking every day. Are our governments listening? That is another question that we need to ask. And I dare say, unfortunately, they are not listening. They are just giving us reactionary messages to instill some amount of inspiration, but we need much more than inspiration. We need action, not a bag of mouth. Now, Al Jazeera carried an important story: who has profited most from the war on Iran? No, they're asking that question. That says Al Jazeera asking the question. Now, nearly 4 months since the United States and Israel first launched strikes on Iran, sending energy prices soaring and disrupting global trade, the two sides are holding talks in Switzerland with a memorandum of understanding in place, establishing a 60-day ceasefire and framework for negotiations on Iran's nuclear program, sanctions relief, and the future of the Strait of Hormuz. We know that that plan has not succeeded, right? Because they're now striking each other. A lasting deal would ease the economic pain felt by businesses and consumers worldwide. But for some companies, the conflict has proven immensely profitable. What did they say? The conflict has proven immensely profitable for some corporations, for some companies. Defense contractors, oil and gas producers, and investment banks are among the sectors that have seen profits soar as war and uncertainty have upended global markets. So, who exactly has profited the most? This is a question being asked. Energy firms. In terms of hard cold dollars, no one sector has benefited more directly from the war than energy. So are they telling us that we need to move into renewable energy, but they have profited the most from the war? Before the war, about 1/5 of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas (LNG) passed through the Strait of Hormuz. Disruptions to skipping through the narrow waterway sent crude prices soaring and triggered sharp swings in global energy markets. At one point, Brent crude briefly touched $126 a barrel, its highest price in 4 years. The price has since dropped to pre-war levels of about $72 per barrel. Okay, so that is one. So higher prices translated into a massive cash flow windfall for some oil producers who were also able to benefit from larger price gaps between regional energy markets. Saudi, and that is Aramco's first quarter profits rose by 25% to 32.5 billion compared with the same period a year earlier. This firm leveraged its 1,200 kilometers east-west pipeline to the Red Sea, bypassing the Strait of Hormuz to maintain exports at a capacity of 7 million barrels per day while selling oil at higher prices. So they are benefiting, and they have no reason for actually, increasing oil and gas prices, but they do so because they can get away with it. British Petroleum reported first quarter profits of 3.2 billion, more than double the previous year, and roundly beating analyst expectations of 2.67 billion. So we see a lot of these people from Iraq to Saudi Arabia, and all of these places have benefited, not the people themselves, but certainly the corporations. Right, so we have all of these: Saudi Aramco, we have PetroChina, we have Kuwait Petroleum Corporation, ExxonMobil, right? The CNOOC, with Shell, and all of these, major NIOC Iran. All of these people have made profits. You should see the profit here from Iran, from 8 billion to 20 billion, right? And this is Iran. They are making profits while the war is ongoing. So we've got to be careful in terms of taking sides. We have Qatar Energy, and they've moved from 7 billion to 19 billion. We have BP moving from 7 billion to 17 billion. So the beneficiaries extend beyond oil majors, with about 1/5 of global LNG supplies normally being shipped through the Strait of Hormuz. U.S. LNG firms such as Venture Global and Cheniere Energy are well positioned to gain as buyers seek more secure supplies. Now, the defense contractors in the United States, and I'm sure in other parts of the world, they have also benefited a great deal from the war on Iran. Within days of the first U.S.-Israel strikes on Iran at the end of February, the heads of the world's largest arms manufacturers met at the White House and agreed to ramp up weapons production as U.S. munitions stockpiles dwindled. Executives from the RTX, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, and we have BAE Systems, L3Harris, and Honeywell attended the talks. All are sitting on billions of dollars in orders, backlogs that are likely to grow as governments rush to replenish their arsenals. So we're seeing that these people are benefiting while the average masses, the masses of people around the world, they are the ones actually not benefiting from this war. We're actually suffering. And we can see through the high cost of living, because they're telling us while they're making huge sums of money off oil and natural gas, they're telling us that it has to go up because we have the war, and they're blaming it on the war. But the fact of the matter, what they're not saying is that the war has given them lots of money. That is what they're not saying. The war has profited them. But they're telling us, they're giving us the impression that it has not done anything for them. And this is what we have to understand. Now, in another article that was written in the Jacobin, they're telling us too that the war on Iran has made rich even richer, the rich even richer. So they're telling us that the war on Iran has made the rich even richer. But people are listening to their governments, and they are just giving us the simplistic understanding that it is the war. It is the war. And then we listen to them thinking that they're going to solve the problem when they're not solving the problem, because they're not telling us the truth. You're not going to hear this from your government, that the war in Iran has really enriched the richer. And many of these oil and gas companies are benefiting from the war. They will tell you, on the other hand, that though we have Trump to blame, or we have this person to blame, but they're not going to tell you about the oligarchs who are benefiting from the war. Will they? No, because you are also not wanting to know the truth, right? So the recent war in Iran has triggered a massive global oil shock. virtually everyone on the planet relies on oil or on products that require it, which means virtually everyone is now paying more for the basics of daily life. It feels like the rare crisis that hurts everyone equally. It doesn't. New research from economists Gregor, and I think his name is Seminuik, and Isabella Weber and colleagues uses financial forensics to show exactly how supply shocks funnel money upward. Over 50% of the profits from the COVID and Ukraine related supply shocks of 2021 and 2022 went to the top 1% of the US wealth distribution. The bottom 50% received just 1%. There's every reason to believe the same pattern is playing out right now with the war on Iran. So we are seeing here where the rich is getting richer and all of that wealth is moving into the hands of the 1%. Now, what happens when that really happens? And it is happening. It is that we, the people at the bottom, are going to be exploited by the wealthy people because they're going to give us lots of excuses for why the economy is not doing well. The economy is not doing well because of the war, and only if the war would stop, then the price of oil and gas would go down. But what we're hearing from other experts is that the war on Iran has caused what? The rich to be getting richer. And that is exactly what is happening. But that's not what is happening, right? According to our governments, we are working towards ending the war. And after we've ended the war, then everything will go back to normality. And this is where the deception lies. This is where the deception lies. And we have to keep watching and see what is going. Now, let me look at there are some people giving from their respective countries. They're telling us what is happening in their neck of the woods, right? And we're going to listen to some of these, experiences. And let's begin with Jamaica. And then we're going to move into other Caribbean countries where people are actually telling us what is happening and how do people survive given the challenges that they meet from day to day, because people are just not surviving. And very soon we're going to see that that criminality and all of these things are going to be on the rise because people are just not able to express themselves. And sometimes they're shy. They don't want to have these difficult conversations because people are not talking about it. So they are just waiting. Let me share this with you, and then we are going to discuss what this young man here is saying in terms of how much it would take for people who live in Jamaica to live in Jamaica and to survive. Okay, this is something that we need to look at. Let me put it on the screen, and then yes, there. So let me see if I can turn up the volume, and then have you listen to it, okay? Can you hear?
150,000 Jamaican dollars per month if you're in the Kingston area.
All right, let me see if I can turn it. Let me see if I can rewind it.
No, I live and work in numbers for you. So let's start at 50,000 Jamaican dollars per month if you're in the. Next up is the utilities, so light, water, and internet, groceries, because we have to eat food. So I'm going to be very conservative with this. I'm going to give it 38,000 Jamaican dollars per month. You want to move from point A to point B, you want to move on your own accord, and you want to get in an AC when the place hot. Jamaica burn up right now. Let's say you want to use a little Honda Fit. Maybe you're going to pay the bank like 30,000 Jamaican dollars per month if you take out that one loan, and then to put gas into that Honda Fit. For done with the needs category, we can move on to the wants now. One of the biggest selling points for Kingston is the restaurants that they have. They have a huge selection, and you want to go out, you want to dine out, because the dining out, let's say you do 1 to 2 of those per month, it can run you around 25,000 Jamaican dollars. Now in the age of internet, the subscriptions is a must. You're going to have your Amazon, you're going have your Netflix, and maybe if you do some little content on the side, like what I do, you're going to use Canva, and that's going to be rounded out to 6,000.
All right. I'm not sure why that is actually buffering. So let me stop it because I'm not sure what. Let's go on to another one that I did on the screen. So let me take this off here and show another one that is on the screen. Not sure why that is buffering. Let me delete this. All right. Let me get back to another one so we can look at another one that I have downloaded because I'm not sure why it's buffering on the screen. Okay, so let me go to another video, another clipping, and as we look at the cost of living in these various countries, we can go now to the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. Let us look at that, and then let me turn this off, this thing here, because it's buffering. I'm not sure what's going on with it. Okay, so we have that. Did I put it up on the screen? Okay, yeah, let
now you're
me.
making $15,000 for the month. Let's take a look at your budget and how you get by $15,000 for the month. Let's take a look at her budget and how she might live her lifestyle. So first up, before Miss Marilyn collects her pay, she has to pay taxes. Within Trinidad and Tobago, once you're earning over $7,500 for the month, then you have to pay 25% on every dollar earned after that in income tax. Therefore, if she's making $15,000, her income tax would be 25% of $7,500, which will be $1,875. Let's also round up the national NIS payments and also her health surcharge and PYE to $400, as we know NIS rose recently. This gives you a total of $2,275 in taxes that Miss Marilyn has to pay, giving her a take-home pay of $12,725. So first off, Miss Marilyn has to live somewhere. She has one kid to take care of, and unfortunately, she wasn't left behind any property or houses from her generations before for her to build upon. She also started working from the ground up, working from minimum wage in her company, so she never was able to afford a home. Therefore, Miss Marilyn has to look to rent. She found this two-bedroom apartment where she could share with her kid in Chaguanas. It has all the amenities that you're looking for, and also it's $4,000 for the month, which is well within her budget. The recommended amount that you should pay on rent is 1/3 of your salary. Taking a look at the house here, she has a nice bathroom area, very modern, clean, something fitting and comfortable for her and her kid to live. A nice living area where she could set up and have dinner and whatnot and live comfortable. So she pays $4,000 in rent for this nice two-bedroom apartment for her and her kid to live comfortably. Next, Miss Marilyn has to pay bills. Unfortunately, in her $4,000 rent, she still has to pay the electricity bills and all the other utilities. So we're talking water, electricity, and all other bills that she might have to pay, her internet and whatnot. Also, under this category, we're putting all subscriptions. She might have Netflix, she might have a Disney account, she might have other subscriptions that she has subscribed to. Also, we're putting the expenses of her kids' subscriptions or any other small subscription fees she might be paying for lessons or some other school activities that she might be paying for in her utilities bill. So to cover all these expenses, we'll budget $1,500, which should comfortably cover her electricity, her bills, and other subscriptions and fees that she might pay for throughout the month. Next, Miss Marilyn has to drive because she has to take her kid to school, and also she needs to get to work and back home comfortably. She's now a manager at her job, so she's not driving any ordinary Almira. She's looking for an SUV where she can be comfortable and it can be reliable and take her to and from where she has to go. On $1,500 a
Okay.
month, she cannot afford to buy one in cash, so she has to take it out on hire purchase. And under this one, she's paying $1,200 fortnightly or $2,400 for the month. She qualifies to take this out on hire purchase as she's making way more than $2,900 fortnightly, and she has been working at the same job for over 20 years. So Miss Marilyn is driving in a brand new SUV, and she's paying $2,400 per month in installments. Next, she has to go to the
Okay, so we can see where the cost of living, what people are getting for their income in the Caribbean, many people are barely surviving. And notice that this Trinidadian guy was suggesting that this was a manager, right? She worked her way up from minimum wage, and she's now the manager of a company. And even $15,000 is not able to allow her to live comfortably. And I was reading the comments on that video, and many people were saying that it requires much more than 15,000 TNT dollars to be able to survive in Trinidad and Tobago. But there are people who are getting less than the 15,000, or perhaps the 9,000 or 10,000 that some are suggesting. Even with that sum of money, they're living on the edge. In Jamaica, the young man was suggesting that it would take over 400,000 Jamaican dollars if you want to live comfortably. Not anything big, right? Just, decently. He's suggesting that it would, and the ordinary Jamaican is not earning, for the most part, over even 100,000 Jamaican dollars. So can you imagine if it's 400,000 and you are barely earning 100,000 Jamaican dollars? How are you surviving? And that's the question many are asking. How are people really surviving? Now, we know that remittances is one thing, that they survive through money sent to them by their families and friends abroad. We also know that some of them are in the illicit trade of narcotics and also guns and other, substance. So we understand that the Caribbean have the illegal trade, the illegal market is going to be the one that they're going to rely on for sustenance. We also understand that some of them are on TikTok and YouTube, so social media play a very important role in helping them to survive, as they have their videos up and they talk what is on their minds and people give them views and so forth. So we understand that that is also filling a gap, a hole in the whole work environment, because had it not been for social media, I really don't know what many of our citizens would do, because a lot of what is happening in the market right now is they don't have jobs, because we're not going through a productive phase of our economy where every day you'd wake up and you see new businesses coming up, and they're also done locally. They're telling us about mid to what do you call it, small businesses, but at the end of the day, they are not local small businesses for the most part, right? They're coming from abroad, and many times they send their monies away. Now let's move to another country. Before I go to another country, let's stick with Trinidad, and we're going to look from another important Trinidadian commentator, and I think this is a very good analysis that he gave of Trinidad and their economy, and he's saying much of what is happening is deliberate. He's saying here much of what is happening is deliberate. So let's go to him.
How to fix the economy. And it's that they are not willing to do. I'm gonna show you guys. This is Central Bank's website, right? So we go to statistics, data center, economic and financial statistics. I'm going to go to the external sector because this is where we deal with foreign exchange. And I'm going to show you under the balance of payments. I'm going to switch this to annually, right? There are only two things you need to know here: the current account, the financial account. These are the two things that determine all of our forex. You'll see the current account here, and everything underneath here is just stuff that belongs to the current account.
Yes.
And then there's the financial account, which is here, and everything here is stuff that belongs to the financial account. Or everything boils down to these two accounts, right? Now, the current account is what they talk about on TV, the imports and the exports, the things we sell, the things we buy. We're not exporting enough. We import in too much things. We have foreign tastes. We import in cars and fancy things and price mat and chicken trafficking and all that nonsense, right? This here, our exports, you could see are from 2024, the latest year, 10 billion. Exports, 10 billion. And our imports here, 7.5. We're exporting 10. This includes oil and gas. We're exporting 10 and importing 7.5, which means there's a surplus of about $2.5 billion, right? This is that we import. But when you take all those things into account, in terms of everything we buy, sell, or procure, we are 645 million in the positive, right? So all this talk about we importing too much, no, we're 645 million in the positive. So the problem happens on the financial account. You see, the financial account is not imports and exports. This is not the stuff that we buy and sell. What happens on the financial account, this is when the big boys make investment decisions. This is when people who have currency decide where they're going to invest. Now, normally, for small island developing countries like Trinidad, there's investment that comes in from abroad. There's what you call foreign direct investment. You all would have heard that term before. Foreign direct investment. This is when big companies outside invest and they build plants and factories and set up businesses in Trinidad. So normally there's an inflow, but in Trinidad, we no longer have an inflow. We used to have it. We don't have it anymore. In fact, there's a 865 million outflow. And what does that mean? It means that citizens of Trinidad, Trinidadian businesses, Trinidadian citizens, Trinidadian businessmen are taking the forex that we have, that we earn, that we got from the exports and imports. They are taking that forex and they are investing it outside in stocks and bonds, and they're setting up businesses in other countries. They're setting up factories in other countries. The money is leaving. It's leaving. What has won, right? So you see, these two things here taken together supposed to give you, so your current account, which is 645, and your financial account, which is 865, supposed to give you your balance, right? But our balance is actually 650 in the negative, and that's because of this thing here called errors and omissions. Now, this one, errors and omissions, is when the information doesn't add up. This is when the math's not mathsing. And the reason that our math's not mathsing in Trinidad, we have minus 434 going out. And the reason we have that much going out is because of the oil and gas sector. You got a little of a thing called transfer pricing. You know, I've talked about transfer pricing already. So this is when so central bank gets this information because it knows how much stuff we export. It knows how much, let's say, the ammonia, the urea, etc. It knows the quantity, but it doesn't know the price that it was exported at. Now, they could assume it's the normal international price that these things are supposed to be traded at. But guess what? A lot of the companies in Trinidad, because of the loopholes, they don't actually export at the price they're supposed to export at. In fact, they drop that price rock bottom in order to avoid taxes in Trinidad, right? So this is a mechanism they use so we don't collect the taxes, right? And because their price is so low, we don't get the foreign exchange either.
Good evening. Good evening.
So your foreign exchange problem in Trinidad is due to two things. It's not due to your trade. It's not because of your imports and exports. Your trade is fine. Your trade is positive. It's because nobody is investing in Trinidad. And the Trinis are actually taking. Number two, it's because the oil and gas companies who are operating here are exploitative. They're not doing business on the level. They're taking advantage of loopholes using transfer pricing. So if you want to fix forex in Trinidad, there's two things you need to do. Number one, you need to deal with transfer pricing, and the minister knows this, the ministry knows this, all of them, they've known this for the past. They've known this for the past 20 years. All of them know it. That's number one. And number two, how are you going to sort out the problem with investing? Because let me explain to you this one, and this is the most critical part of this whole conversation. Students in Trinidad, they will not invest in Trinidad. If they don't believe their money could be converted to other currencies, they will not keep their money here. And if they can't run their business efficiently, they will not set up their business here. We have an investment grade rating, so that's supposed to work in our favor. But the operability of businesses here, man, nothing works in this country. When you look at the ports, you look at the problems in the justice system, you look at the problems in the courts, look at licensing. Can you imagine trying to run a fleet of vehicles in Trinidad right now? Can you even? So when companies look at this and you can't get US, right? So this is a self-reinforcing cycle here. Because you can't get US, they're not leaving any US here, and the people who have US here are sending it out. So unless you fix these problems, unless you could give people confidence that they could keep their money here and be able to convert to US sometime in the future, unless you could fix the operability problems here, if you could get the systems under control and make it easy to do business, unless you could deal with those oil companies and get rid of those tax loopholes, these are the things that we need to fix to actually change the economy in Trinidad and Tobago. Because unless we could get that Forex in here, we will not be able to buy the things that we need. We will not be able to get food. You will not be able to get medicine. You'll not be able to get none of the stuff, your phones, your cars, none of it will be able to get the stuff that we need, which is the whole point of an economy in the first place, right? So when we talk about the economy, get informed, stay informed, look at the data, pull up the website for yourself, ask ChatGPT what all those things mean. It will tell you, and it will give you analysis. It's pretty good. So you all please keep informed, keep focus, yeah? And you all have
I'm happy for this education, and many people would not want to listen to him because they think that they know. And they think that what they hear on the radio stations and also on television, that is what is happening. And the central bank is actually working towards improving the currency and what they're doing and what they're not doing. What he's suggesting, and he's spot on, and this is not only happening in Trinidad, by the way, it's happening in all of our countries. The central banks and all of these oligarchs and these millionaires and billionaires, they are treating the economy as a stock market where they actually, bet. It's like a casino. And what they do, as he's suggesting in Trinidad, there's no really shortage of foreign exchange. What they're doing, they're sending the foreign exchange out. That's the elites, the bankers, right? And the oligarchs, they're in Trinidad and they're playing with people's lives. And then they tell them, wow, and they give them all sorts of reasons why we have, a shortage in foreign, in foreign currency, because that is the only way they can do it. Lie, right? And people believe them. People would not want to listen to a guy, an intelligent young man like this, because he's saying a lot of things that they don't understand. They don't want to understand because they would prefer to listen to something as simplistic that is just foreign exchange, a shortage of foreign exchange, and very soon, miraculously, things will be better. But I thought that this was interesting, an interesting analysis. And Stephen Knight is saying here, who is to blame? Our supervisors are to blame. They sold us out for coins, and we as taxpayers are to blame because we allow this to happen because some of us vote on emotions, in my opinion. Correct. And what too is that we vote out of ignorance. We vote out of ignorance, and that is the whole point. Welcome, sir, and welcome to the live. We are going to show another one by this Barbadian, and I thought she was also on the same line of this Trinidadian young man who explained what is really happening there in Trinidad. So let me see if I can get her. Barbados cost of living. I think this is the one I got from her, and she had some very important point about Barbados. Let's get her on the screen. Let me put her back on the screen, sorry.
That are not spoken about, and I want to shine light on them because I think it's important to start open conversation about things that need changing and putting a spotlight on things that need it. And one thing that is triggering me and has been for all of the years that I've been visiting them is that no one talks about money in regard to the people who have the power of it. So I'm calling out the politicians here. and the big dogs in charge of how this country is run. Because there is an election going on very shortly, this week or next week, I believe. And I ain't calling no names out because I'm not getting involved in that. Is my country of residence. But I do want to say that I haven't seen any sort of communication with the people about how the cost of living is going to be changed or improved. All I've seen is inspirational quotes or motivational sentences like just just like stay in there, just kind of suck it up, like stay positive. Like now, I want to know what you're going to be doing about this situation. I want to know the plan. I want to know the steps involved. Something that people also don't really know or talk about is that a lot of the main income streams into Barbados have been sold to external countries.
Right.
Like, I don't even think Barbados has a local bank anymore. I think that was sold. I can't remember who to. Canada? Someone. Massey, I believe. So Massey is the main supermarket in Barbados. That isn't owned by Barbados anymore. That is Bermuda, I think, that bought that, or Trinidad. And this isn't me slating these other countries for buying and investing and taking ownership of these businesses. What I'm irritated by is the lack of foresight of what this means for the country. Because if you're going to be selling up retail, so your big luxury hotels, your houses, you're going to sell your banks, the supermarkets, gas stations, where your petrol is sourced from and how it's sold, those are really important money income streams for a country. So what this essentially means is all of the money that you're making, gas stations, hotels, supermarkets, none of that, or a very teeny tiny percentage of that money is going back into the country. So without those key core staples that make so much money, the country ain't making any money. Nothing, the people be spending and their money going elsewhere. It's going to Jamaica, it's going to Trinidad, it's going to Canada, it's going to America, it's England, sorry. But you get my point. I don't see anyone talking about this. It's like under wraps. It's like people don't want to.
Yeah, so we got her point, right? We got her point, because what is happening really is that the monies that they're telling us is coming from these FDI, that's the foreign direct investment, are not coming there to stay in tourism, right? And in other businesses that they say they have, climate change, all of these elusive sort of investments. You know, Africans coming to Barbados or going to Jamaica. These things are not going to miraculously fit, what you call it, fix our economy. And there are individuals who are saying to me, "Oh, it's going to work." I mean, how is it going to work? They have not given us a plan in terms of how the African labor to the Caribbean, to Barbados, to Jamaica, and other parts of the Caribbean is going to actually improve the standard of living. What businesses are they coming with? Or are they coming to compete with us already for the limited resources that we already have here? And guess what is going to happen? They're going to tell you that somehow something is wrong with you. You're racist, you're a bigot, you don't like Africans, and they pit us against each other when they're the ones responsible for destroying the economy. I can tell you that is what they're going to do. So they're going to shut us down by telling us that we are you're anti-black, you're anti-African, even people who sound intelligent, who should know better, but because of this black sentimental mentality and the sentimentalism, they think that by Africans coming to the Caribbean, it means we're going to unite and somehow we are going to be ushered into some utopian society, which is not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It doesn't work like that. Our economies don't work like that. We have to think beyond emotionalism and begin to understand that they are literally engineering the collapse of our respective economies. Andre saying, welcome. Yes, I agree. A lot of us vote on our emotions, and ties. This last election is a clear example. Yes, and we vote on and the same emotions of being black, and nothing is wrong with being black. Nothing is wrong with helping each other out. My uncle always told me that you can only help someone when you're strong, right? Because if you are not strong economically, that person is going to what? Push you down, and you're going to become weak economically and financially. So if we invite people to come to our Caribbean when we are suffering, our economies are in tatters, right? We're not surviving, we're not thriving, then how are we going to help other people? We can't. They're only going to drag us even further into the pit, right? And that's what we have to understand. But it's almost like we are not ready to think. We just listen to what they're telling us. And as this white girl was suggesting from Barbados, she said she heard nothing about the cost of living and what they were going to do about it during the election campaign in Barbados. Because all they were talking about was something motivational and inspirational, and what climate change and how we're black and we have to unite with Africa, as if that is going to fill our bellies. These are just empty words, right, for people who can't think. Right, and we have to grow up and stop just talking empty talk. We want to help our African brothers and sisters and other unfortunate people in the world, but we can't help them unless we are economically strong. Okay, we can't. And they can say anything they want to say because they have money. We don't. Trinidad got to feel the pain. Welcome, Cynthia Prime. The pain for their stupidity. They know Kamala wasn't good, but they despise the other party. Now pressure. Now, this is something I want to say, Cynthia Prime, that I noticed that during the war, a lot of Trinidadians listened to my videos because they were aligned with what I was saying. Now, I wasn't saying actually I'm anti-Kamala or anti the PNM. I am about, policies and systems, and I think that the Caribbean region is too politically charged, and we need to move away from the left and the right and Indian versus the blacks, because at the end of the day, both are not helping us. And we need to look at their policies rather than their color and their ethnic background, because that is also destroying, destroying the economy. Because one thing the white Barbadian said, I think she's Barbadian, is that in Barbados, people are shy from speaking out these things. They don't want to talk about these things because they're too polite. You have to be that polite Barbadian. So you are not forced to speak out against these hard truths, right? And that is what she's saying, and it's true. That we often don't want to attack the bull by its horn. We rather than looking at the symptoms and saying, it is Kamala, it's Miss Mia Motley, it's Andrew Holness, but it is much bigger than that. Okay, so that's what we're saying here on this platform. Trevor is saying, what's funny about the video on Barbados that people would instantly think is she's white, meaning she has money and is privileged, and yet she's stating rather truth about the cost of living. And that is true. But the fact is, even if she were rich, and perhaps she is, I don't know, the fact is that it's going to affect all of us from the upper to the, because only 1%, as I opened the program today, I mentioned to you that the war on Iran is only benefiting the 1%. And perhaps she is not among the 1%. She might be a seasoned middle class in Barbados, but she might not be one of those, what you call it now, oligarchs. So she's also speaking up because all of this is going to affect black, white, right, and all classes, except the 1%. Of which perhaps she's not a part. Now we have Century Prime saying, now pressure coming down the pipe. It is. It's already here. And very soon everything will have to give. This is not going to be forever. Soon, one day, something will have to give. WHD saying, cost of living is insane in Trinidad and Tobago. Barbados has been bought and sold 10 times over like Jamaica. Correct. It is like Jamaica. It has been sold out. Now, the difference between Barbados and Jamaica is that I believe that, Barbados has always had this, a small remnant of the British elites, the British class, the British planters that were left over. They opted to stay in Barbados, right? They love Barbados. The English had this hate-love relationship with Barbados, and they still do. So it seems to me, and then Barbados has a good currency, and they have also the offshore banking system to be frank with you, I don't know how the Barbadian economy stands up. I don't know, because Barbados produces nothing. And and they have no natural resources that I know of. Like Trinidad, you have oil and gas, and Guyana. So I really don't know how they prop up the Barbadian economy, but how long can they do it? I don't know. And how long will it stay propped up until it finally comes down? I don't know, right? It's the Barbadian economy, just like the British economy, to me, is a mystery. It's a mystery that I don't understand. Maybe a Barbadian economist will be able to explain that to me. Stephen Knight is saying she's telling the truth, and none of the commentators on TV or radio will not speak on this, right? Because you have to be a polite Barbadian, right? And you can't be too rowdy. You don't have to be rowdy, but they're going to think you're rowdy and you're disturbing the peace, right? And Barbados is, one of the things I noticed, there was a Trinidadian who lives in Barbados, and she's speaking about what this lady is speaking about, and people are attacking her. Let me just show you what she's saying about Barbados. And she's Trinidadian, she lives there, right? So she's comparing her country to the likes of Barbados. Let me see where I had it saved here. Maybe I did not save it. Yeah, it's right here. Okay, and I'll show it to you right now. Listen to what she's saying, and then we talk about what she's saying.
Globally, and something that I think about literally every day is how are people who are making a minimum wage surviving in this country? Because when I think about it, it doesn't make sense. The cost of housing, groceries, goods and services, transportation, and then if you have children on top of that, literally how are people who are making $5 an hour, which is such
that's a good question, a good point she's raising. But the people in Barbados are suggesting that, not all of us are poor. She wasn't saying that. She was just saying that the person who is on the minimum wage, which is higher than the typical, like Jamaica is lower than Barbados minimum wage. I think Barbados minimum wage is a bit above $5. Jamaica's about $2 something. But she's asking the question, as she probably would ask in Jamaica, how do people there survive? And they were, not all of us are poor, and not all of us are on, minimum wage. But even the ones who are middle class and they're working relatively decent salary, the cost of living in Barbados, like Jamaica, is just way too high. And she's asking, how do they live? And she's saying, I'm Trinidadian, I'm comparing both countries, and my country, as she's suggesting, is actually very expensive, just like any other country too, but not as bad. Nothing is wrong with doing that, guys. Let's stop now, move away from our nationalism. When people are asking important questions, relevant questions, let's not be too nationalistic and then begin to put everything under the rug, because at the end of the day, we are the ones who are going to suffer, and not our politicians and the oligarchs. So that was good. And then we have Andy saying PNM was going to do nothing better. Correct. Nothing better. They were not going to do anything better. Both parties are in the same boat. That is it. Whether it's in Jamaica or wherever they are, they do the same thing. And that is why during the war, I had a lot of, between, when before the Venezuelan president was taken out, and I was talking about Trinidad and all of that, people thought I was Indians. I wasn't speaking against Miss Kamala Persson-Bissessar. I was looking at her policy and not her ethnic background, right? Her ethnic, whatever you want to call it. So Trevor is saying to survive comfortably in Barbados, one must be making around 5K, that's 2.5 USD per month. Most people are making an average of 1,500 to 2,500. Anything beyond that, you're lucky or affiliated to be hired. So you say 2.5, and 2.5 would be what? The medium that I think, would that put you safely through the month and live comfortably? Okay, I would like to know that, because 5K and 2.5, 5K would be the 5K Barbadian dollars, and 2.5. Okay, I got you. Yeah. Marie saying she hasn't said anything that could be considered impolite, right? Yet she is being attacked. Correct. She has said nothing. In fact, I thought she was concerned. She was expressing concern that she's living there. She's comparing the same economy to Trinidad. She's saying, yeah, things might not be rosy in Trinidad too, but the cost of living, at least they have, as I'm saying, in Trinidad, they have oil and gas, and they still are a productive economy for the most part, right? More productive certainly than Barbados and Jamaica. So when we talk about these things, we want to know, we're not here to put down any economy, whether it's Jamaica's or Barbados or Trinidad's economy. We're here to ask the hard questions. How do people survive? And then the tourists go to these countries too, and they ask the same question. How do the citizens here survive? In Jamaica, they ask it. How are they surviving? Because we go to, buy some basic stuff. I've seen in Jamaica where tourists go to the supermarket and they're saying, I'm buying these stuff and I couldn't afford them in the UK or in the US. How are these people here buying them? How are they able to live month to month? So the tourists are asking the hard questions. And that's what I'm going to say too. If we want to hide things, things can no longer be hidden. Because the tourists go down there, or foreigners like the Trinidadian in Barbados, and they get on the internet and they talk and they show you things. So there's nothing we can hide anymore. We're not living in the 20th century, in 1990s or whatever. We're living in the 21st century where people pick up their phones and they will show you around the grocery store. They will show you around the community and say, this is the Jamaica that you're not seeing, where people are actually not surviving. It's not this tourist, utopia, whatever people create and say that it's, it's Irie and everything. Everybody down there is not Irie. They're not, because they're not thriving. They're not coping. Joshua is saying drugs are keeping up Barbados' economy. Wow. And that could be the reason for the crime and violence, because Barbados was not known, in former times for a high crime rate. And Trevor is saying, and the unemployment rate is off the chart and lots of contract work are scattered, which is unstable to say the least. Then people are flying in low-cost workers and displacing local even more. By the way, let me just say something here. The reason why they're taking the Africans to Barbados and to the other parts of the Caribbean, and we welcome them if, they're decent people and they're productive. Nothing is wrong with having or African robbers in the Caribbean. But the leaders are doing it because they want to distract us from what they're not doing. And then now when citizens begin to complain, just like you have many Haitians in Bahamas, they're against the Haitians and they're talking, all of this is political theater in which the Bahamian prime minister and leaders there, they're trying to pit two groups against the other. And then we are distracted and think if Haitians go or if the Africans go, then everything will be fine and dandy. And that is not going to happen. So what they do, they create problems, and problems create distractions, and distractions create a lot of podcasts, and you go and you react and nothing gets done. So I think they know that the economy is about to tanker. They're bringing in more people so that we can fight against them. We're distracted about talking about these matters. Right? Because we are so much concerned about the numbers of Africans or Haitians in our respective countries. Right? If you go to Santo Domingo, the same thing happens. The people, the authorities in Santo Domingo, in the Dominican Republic, treat their people like nobody. Right? At the same time, they use the Haitian migration, which they benefit from. Their economy greatly benefits from Haitian, free labor and also cheap labor. Yet still, the oligarchs blame the Haitians. Oh, blame the Haitians. They're coming to the economy. And then you have the ordinary citizen fighting against the Haitian because they're distracted and they're not seeing what their authorities are doing and how their authorities do not respect them, Dominicans in their own country. All right, and that's exactly what they're going to do to Barbadians and also to Jamaicans by importing all of these Africans to these nation states. Stephen Knight is saying, They're angry because she's telling the truth. Right? They're angry. Right. We don't like to hear the truth. I've always said about Jamaicans specifically that we don't like to hear the truth. We hide the truth behind what you call it now, nationalism, nationality. Oh, talk about your country. Don't talk about mine. Well, guess what? I can talk about any country, just like how any European come here or American and they talk about our country. And they put us up on TikTok and Facebook and all of these and expose us. So let us expose ourselves and begin to have these conversations rather than having foreigners to come, people outside of the region. She's Trinidadian, so she's a part of the region, and she's asking some relevant questions. And I thought they were good questions to ask. And it shows that she is sympathetic. Trevor is saying what this is doing is making crime an industry for lawyers and politicians and the injustice system. Correct. Absolutely. I like the term injustice system, not the justice system. On the flip side, to your topic of education, they're only creating functional slaves. That is what they're doing. That is what they're doing. And it's a pity that that is what is happening in the region. A region that we thought had, people who would have pushed back in former times. We would have pushed back against what is happening, but somehow it seems to me that we are so much distracted. This is a very good medium. The social media, the social network, right? The social media network. However, I think that we are reacting, as we have been saying, too much rather than showing the root and getting the problem attacked by their root. And the root is oligarchs. Oligarchs. They don't want us to prosper. Wars to them are profitable, and they will continue these wars and make money while we're dying economically and physically. They just don't care. And then we are so caught up like a football game. Who is winning? Who is winning? Who's winning the match? Is it Argentina or is it Iran or the United States? And it has nothing to do with what we see that they're doing. Now, Santian Prime is saying the Caribbean needed to band together, but we can't do that because we got a few moles in amongst us, like my Tobago, that's Trinidad and Guyana, which is rocking the boat and upsetting the other Commonwealth members. Yeah, and we need to talk about that too, because I saw the other day where Mrs. Kamala Predecessor and the gentleman there in Guyana were supporting U.S. foreign policy toward Colombia. And I'm wondering why. Why are we getting involved? Why is Guyana and why is Trinidad getting themselves involved in Colombian elections or what they didn't do or did not do? Let their people decide who they want. And the journalists there should be speaking out. Now, are the people, the citizens there. WZ saying like what is going on in South Africa. Yes. We don't want them. They're trying. That's what they're doing. They're bringing in all these immigrants, and then we are now going to be spending lots of time saying that the immigrants are taking away our jobs. And we fight, and then our prime ministers try to intervene and say that we ought not to be discriminatory, and we were also enslaved, and they're coming. We need to talk about Agenda 2023. That's Agenda 2030, not 23. Agenda 2030. And the whole matter of immigration, because that is something that is on their agenda, and we are going to become borderless states where we have to help people to move because of climate change. So all of these movement of people is a part of the global Agenda 2030, objective. Now, WHZ is saying they blame the Zimbabweans and Malawians in South Africa, and that's what they're doing. Because they bring them and then they tell us we should blame these people, not to blame them. So the blame shifts from the authorities and what they're not doing to the recently arrived immigrants or migrants, whatever you want to call them. And that is how the conversation is had. It's framed. It's immigration. It's not the authorities. And if we solve the problem of illegal, Haitians, illegal Jamaicans, illegal, people from Africa, then everything will be okay. But that is not true, right? That is not true. Because oftentimes the Haitian is doing the jobs or the other migrants that many of us perhaps would not do too. So they are the problem. The problem is with the leaders who are, creating provoking. They're provoking the different populations. And then they tell us that something we need to open our minds and we need to be less discriminatory. Now, since Santin Prime is saying we appreciate these conversations, can we go to talk about it? No, yes. The whole matter of it is that many people don't want to talk about it because it's too uncomfortable and it is not what is in the mainstream. And people don't want to sound as if they're different, right? We all want to sound as if we're normal. And when you speak like these, you don't sound normal and you don't look normal. And many of us, that's why when the vaccines, and many of us did not say, we say no to the vaccines, we were looked upon as crazy, right? WHD saying, with this massive influx of Venezuelans in TNT, who should not be there, right? That is going to be a problem too. That is going to be a problem too. And then you're going to hear that the Venezuelans are the problem and not the government, the reigning authorities are going to try to solve the problem. And when they try to solve the problem, they make it worse, right? Anything that they do. And that is why I'm not sure why people are telling me that Mr. Motley's, agenda of importing Africans to Barbados is going to work. What have they done in recent times that has worked? You tell me one policy that our politicians right throughout the world, including the Caribbean, name me one policy that they have implemented that in recent times that has been effective and has helped our economies to grow. Not in the way they are saying it's growing, but really helping us thrive, the citizens. Because when we talk about economic growth, that is their economic growth. It has nothing to do with our lives. It's about them and what they're doing, and they're going to, treating the economy like a stock market. And if things are, they're investing and making hundreds of thousands of dollars while we are being impoverished. Now, Trevor is saying Motley recently announced affordable housing starting at $170K for something as big as small chicken coop and no land. The land they are talking about is all agriculture land. What remains they control. And she's here. I have a clip of her talking about helping Barbados to survive. She was at the recently held CARICOM session there in St. Kitts and Nevis. Well, no, not in St. Lucia.
Living allowance for all pensioners, $100 a month, plus $50 US, plus, of course, for those who are on welfare. And on top of that, we've increased the rates of welfare by 30% again to be able to offset so that those at the bottom are not in a more vulnerable position. We then also have looked at the fact that we believe that we need to make available the prices to consumers. And in some instances, some countries have apps that people can use so they can go and search the prices at different stores. And we would like to be able to ensure that rather than historic pricing, that we can get real-time access to those pricing for those who have the apps.
What they're doing, I'm not sure if you recognize what they're doing. They're making us become more and more dependent upon them. They're not telling us about creating, an economy that in which you can find jobs, you can be productive, you can have your own businesses. They're just talking in these, okay, we have to, give them some subsidies and it will help them. So it's almost like a philanthropic, economy, and then we depend on them and we have to do what they tell us to do. So what we have now are not industrialist societies. We have philanthropic economies where the prime ministers, they pretend they're not helping us really, but they pretend to be fulfilling our basic needs, right? And that is where we're going to move in one day to the whole matter of the universal basic income, because they're already conditioning us that is what they are about to do, that we don't need all of this money that we used to work for. If they just give us some basic income, basic universal income, then we'll be able to meet our needs and not to meet our wants, right? Just barely surviving as the Cubans do. Now, the Santin Prime is saying the Three Stooges of Africa, sir, right? And we have here the Three Stooges of Africa, Ruto, Cyril, and we have Ramaphosa and Tinubu. These are probably the biggest economies in Africa, and watch chaos break out because these three incompetent leaders. And we know that they're not necessarily incompetent, as we're saying. We know that they're just following what they're told to do. What the slave master tells them to do, that is what they're doing. And that is why they look ineffective. But our leaders can be effective. You know, they know what to do, but they can't. Right? They know what to do. They know that we're suffering. They know that. They live there and they know that. In Jamaica, for example, Andrew Holness drives on pot-ridden holes, and all foreigners go down there and they say Jamaica is just a country you have to be careful in driving on because of the potholes. The potholes are everywhere, right? Everywhere. So even in neighborhoods that should be decent, have decent, paved roads, don't have them. So they know, they live there, and other foreigners are also, they're highlighting it, that the country is on the edge. So they know, but they pretend. Now, these three leaders, Ruto, I think we read this already, they're not there to help their country. They are there to impoverish us. Ruto's name especially is always ringing, right? And notice, all these African leaders are doing what the Westerners want them to do. So when we talk about Africa and uniting with Africa, we have to be careful. Maybe we can unite with, Niger, the Sahel states, because at least they are saying that they are independent or trying to liberate themselves from Western imperialism. But for the most part, Africa is in the same position as we find ourselves in right now here in the Caribbean, right? They're in the same position. They're not different from us. Maybe because they're having more children than we are having. We're not having all the children that perhaps they're having in Africa. WHZ saying Massey is all over TNT and the Caribbean. Yes, in Jamaica and everywhere. Prices not going to vary from store to store. We need manufacturing and agricultural policy across the Caribbean. Notice that they're talking about agriculture, and their understanding of agriculture is agri-processing, where they are going to process our foods in labs. So if you go to Jamaica too, you see them having all of these big warehouses. These are where our foods will be processed. You will not have agriculture in the traditional sense of agriculture, where you had real farmers who would dig yam holes and plant and all that stuff. That is no longer what is going to happen. Our foods are also going to be engineered. So that's what they mean when they talk about agriculture. I hear them talking about, and many people are fooled, thinking that, they want us to produce and, farmers were planting organic stuff. That is not what they are implying when they talk about agriculture. It is agri-processing, agribusiness, which is really, producing in a lab, right? It's producing in a lab. And if you notice that during the pandemic, even in Europe, they were actually taking farmers off their land, the ones who, would plant for Europe. I can't remember the country. I think it was the same, Ukraine, among other European countries, where they produce for the entire, for the continent. They were actually getting farmers out of work. They're taking them off the land to tell them that they can't plant, right? So their thing is for us to not plant and to develop our own lands. They want to take away our land and then, grow the food in laboratories and to have us dead. Because these foods are going to kill us. That's for sure. Trevor is saying yes, a welfare society to take money by grifting for a cause, so they can push agendas for a paycheck by their masters and take the credit by their followers for speaking well. Absolutely, that they are grifters. They are certainly grifters, and we've got to watch them. We've got to understand that this is deliberate, it's intentional, and they're not reordering or engineering a society in which we can survive. That is not their agenda, but many people think it is. And we've got to be careful about that. The money is in creating and maintaining the pain, problems, and suffering of the people, and the power lays in the promises of relief and aid. And the more we suffer, it's the more they laugh. Because why? We are controllable. Right? We are going to be, and we're already controllable. And they want to have control over the entire world's population. Right? And that is what they're doing. And they're doing it so subtly right? And in some way crude, but to people it looks sophisticated, because when Miss Miyamoto speaks, she speaks so eloquently that people think, yes, she really means us well, and she wants to liberate us from our, global masters, from our Western masters. But she's in bed with them, right? Make no bones about it. She is in bed with them. And so are all our politicians in the Caribbean region. They're also in bed with them. Now, Thazi is saying this aligns with their population reduction agenda. Absolutely. And notice that they don't have to put us back on plantations to control us, right? We have digital control. We have, food control, right? Where you can just eat something and you die. You get sick and you die. Or you might live long enough if you stay on their medication and you have to pay high bills to go to the hospital and to be on drugs for your entire life. So they know what they're doing. Our standard of living has really fallen. Create the problem, WHD saying, and charge us to solve the problem. This could not have been said better. They create the problem and then they charge us. So when we talk about climate change, do you think climate change is about protecting the environment, protecting the climate, reducing, natural disasters from occurring? Or do you think that it's a way to take money away from us by telling us that this is what they're going to do to protect us from climate, just like what Trump is doing in America? He's telling Americans he's protecting them from Iran and from Iranian authoritarianism. At the same time, the oligarchs, as we read earlier on, are making billions of dollars from this war. Okay? So we have to wake up now to realize that all of these things, these agendas that they have for us, are really taking money, extracting money from us, taking from Peter to give to Paul, right? And that's exactly what they're doing. And how is that different from communism? Absolutely no way, because the New World Order is really communism, anew, right? That is what the New World Order is about, not about, protecting us and having us live healthier, lead healthier lives. Now, let's look at another video, into another clipping of a video of the Caribbean. I think I lost one on Guyana. For those of you who are Guyanese, please forgive me. I lost that one, that clipping where they were talking. But based on what I'm seeing in Guyana, it doesn't seem that they're having this huge gap between the cost of living. It seems to me that we complain about the cost of living in Guyana, but it's not as crude as you'd find in Jamaica and also in Barbados. So I'm sort of confused. I was trying to look as much about them. Well, some people are suggesting in Guyana that the cost of housing is where it's very, very expensive. But there was a Guyanese American who lives in Guyana, and she's saying that she can survive on $850 per month and live very comfortably. Mind you, she's a single mom, right? So, but she said she lives comfortably in Guyana. I don't know if you can live on $850 in Jamaica. People do it, but they're barely living. They're barely surviving. Right? And she said she has a decent apartment in Guyana, and other people are talking about Guyana also, and that it's livable. But people there, when I read their newspaper, they're suggesting that in Guyana, things are really bad, right? And the cost of living in Guyana is really high. Now, there was another Guyanese young man visiting his country, and he's talking about the fact that in Guyana, housing is almost equivalent to what you find in the United States. And he's saying that the people there are not earning the requisite salary to be able to afford such a price. Okay, and that's what is happening in Jamaica too. When you go to Jamaica, an apartment, basic apartment, and it can cost you over $1,000 and for nothing. Sometimes it's not even luxurious. Okay, so that's what we have to think about and we should be talking about. Now, Trevor is saying the next big thing is water shortage, which is also a part of the climate change agenda. By the way, on Sunday, I hope I can invite this Trinidadian. I need to send him a letter. He wrote an article in the Express about the data centers that they are being established right there in Trinidad and Tobago. And some Americans that today I saw from the Politico or another newspaper, they're saying that people are getting sick. People are actually getting sick from the data centers. But as you talk about water, Trevor, they're saying that in order to have these data centers, you have to use a lot of water. And Trinidad understand that oftentimes they don't have that precious commodity in their tap, right? So how are they going to have these data centers that require so much water to keep it alive and active, productive, and yet still the citizens there have frequent water loss? I don't know. But these are the crazy things that they're doing and telling us about climate change. How are these things helping to protect us from the climate when they're actually using more energy? These things are using more energy that we can accommodate when our people are crying out for water. In Jamaica, the same thing. You go to Jamaica, you can't get water. I was in Jamaica, for example, and almost all night you remained without water. And this was like in a middle-class neighborhood in Kingston. Entire night without water. And when it comes back at 5 a.m. in the morning, it's just trickling. Ding, ding. Nothing to really use and feel like you're showered. Okay? So these are the contradictions that we see here in the region. They're telling us about climate change and we need to protect the environment and we need to conserve when they're not conserving because the AI system is not going to conserve on energy. The AI system uses a lot of energy, a whole lot. So on Sunday, we are going to discuss what is happening in Trinidad and what could spill out into other parts of the region. Then we have here electricity, absolutely. Absolutely. It costs a lot of electricity, right? And we don't have this renewable energy as they're saying yet, right? Now, yes, data centers, Trevor is saying, are being purposely put on land which pulls tons of water each day. And yes, it makes people living nearby sick. Other countries place them in the ocean. And yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Very good, Trevor, because I was just wondering as I was reading your comment, why don't they place them close to the ocean? Since we are, we are surrounded by water, shouldn't they place them close to the ocean where they can perhaps some engineers? But at the same time, if they're making people sick, what if they're having cancers from these things, right? How are we going to deal with that? Our healthcare system is already rotten. We can't manage more illnesses and these things causing more havoc to our health. And we're not having these discussions. But on Sunday, I'm hoping to have this discussion because it's something that we've had it before, but we need to get more in depth in terms of the data centers that are coming to places like Trinidad and Tobago. So we're moving from, in Trinidad and Tobago, oil and gas to data centers. So it seems to me that Trinidad and Tobago is going to become the hub or one of the hubs of the data centers in the region, right? It is sad. It is sad. And no sort of debates about it. And that's what we're saying too. If you are going to import large numbers of Africans to the Caribbean, if you're going to have data centers in the Caribbean, like in Trinidad, why don't you engage the populace and let them see the pros and the cons? And having assessed the pros and the cons, then they can come up. What about the huge amount of money that they will have to invest in water and also in electricity that is coming from Trinidadian pockets, not coming from the global elites? They will have to pay for this, right? And already they're suffering. These are the things our prime ministers are doing, our leaders are doing, and people don't want to talk about them. All right? Now, Sentient Prime is saying that's crazy to hear what's going on in Guyana, and this is the reason why these live forums she has so much information and bring you up to speed what's going on in the Caribbean. Yes, we have to now begin to up our conversations, elevate the conversation, which we here are doing, because if we don't do it, then our Caribbean countries as we know them are going to go under the water, and they're already going under the water because we're so distracted by the corruption charges and by some little, gossips here and there. And this will not hold us and help us to survive and expose our leadership and their deficiencies. Sentient Promising, I'm a trucker. I go through Tennessee a lot. I heard this is where Elon Musk put his data center, and people are complaining about the environmental impact affecting people, which is in close proximity. Yes, the Americans are complaining. I'm not sure why we're not complaining, but Americans are complaining about these data centers, and yet they have water. At least American homes have, water in their tap. We here in the Caribbean, we can't. In fact, I was surprised that in Trinidad, you guys have problem with electricity in terms of the consistency. That in some cases, sometimes for hours in the day, you don't have electricity. I would have thought that Trinidad would have gotten rid of that because at least they are oil rich and gas rich. Why is Trinidad in the 21st century having problems with electricity in terms of the consistency of having it throughout the day? That is strange. So who's the wealth? Okay, who owns that gas and oil and gas industry? Certainly not the people, because don't they have enough money and the requisite infrastructure to invest in energy to make sure that people have electricity, consistently, right? Now, Stephen Knight is saying, did you see the CARICOM press conference they had the day? These people do not like answering the hard questions. They always move away when you ask them about data centers. No, I didn't see that press conference, but when you ask them, if you have one, please send it to me, Stephen Knight. We could have a clipping of it. I'll show it on the screen. So if you have a small clipping of any of the video there that they were being asked a question, please send it over to me, Stephen. Trevor is saying, in part of Georgia, they are threatening homeowners to move or have the government take their home to build data centers. Now, haven't we been talking about these things, that very soon we will be moved off our lands and that we are going to be sent to what? Smart cities. Right? Smart cities where you can live and you can have access to water, parks, right? And your lab-grown foods, agri-business, whatever you call it, right? You'll have access to that, but you won't necessarily have access to your land. Agenda 2030, where you will, you'll have nothing. That's the Great Reset. You'll have nothing and you'll be happy, won't we? Right? Because what we need, they're going to only give us what we need, not what we want. So if you like to shower 3 times per day, they might just tell you that you have to shower twice per week or thrice per week because you have to conserve. Ladies and gentlemen, you've got to conserve. You're bathing too often. You're cooking too often, right? You want to use electricity and you want to be on the computer all day. And they're telling you that that is not sustainable. And this is what they're telling us. All of this sustainability and these high-flown words, and they sound so well, it's really to take away our autonomy away from us, or economic autonomy, to deprive us of the things that we've worked hard for, because we're not asking them for anything, because we pay our taxes. Don't we? So what we're asking them for is the money that we have paid in taxes is for them to give us the requisite service, because we paid for these things. But they're telling us, no, you are not intelligent enough to use water or to conserve water or energy or whatever. So they have to do it for us. And they have to take, AI. When AI tells them that, oh, Andrew Tucker is using X amount of water, X liter of water, and that is what AI is going to do. So all of these data centers that they have there is to surveil us and to let the authorities know what we are doing, what we're buying, with whom we're talking, with whom people are shacking up, and all of these things, the thing is going to know. In fact, there was a video I watched the other day where in the United States, they said there's a truck, like a tractor trailer, and it passes through your community, and it has surveillance cameras on it that you're not seeing, but it's able to see behind the walls what you're doing. So can you imagine a surveillance truck going through your community and can see everything in your house through your walls? And people are not even understanding that this is not sci-fi anymore. This is real. Okay, so we have to wake up. Yes, imagine talking about sustainability while you destabilize everything possible. That's what they're doing. And climate change. And we're distracted. Oh, yes, right? And racism. And we need to be, inclusive. And we need to have all of these people coming to our countries and just have them. Welcome them. They're your brothers and your sisters. Wow. And we have nothing. Now, Trevor saying yes, and data centers will also promote higher electrical costs, another burden on the people. That is very important that you're raising here. And is it because that's why they're sending it to Trinidad, even though we know Trinidad is brilliant and they're very good at technology. But do you think, Trevor, that they're sending it there because they have the oil and the gas to sort of sustain it, to power these data centers? Now, Anne is saying, I don't know anything about the electricity being out. It happens once in a blue. Okay, good. I'm happy that you're correcting that, because I read that, but I was saying, I don't know if Trinidad having frequent power outages, but I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, that's what I read, that people are complaining that in Trinidad and Tobago, the people in the data centers, they were complaining about the data centers, and people are saying that they're already having problem with electricity. And so maybe in your neck of the woods in Trinidad, you don't have frequent power outages, perhaps in other areas. I've never been to Trinidad, so I can't say that it is true or it is a lie. I'm just telling you what I read. So we have here, the politicians in Trinidad are very short-sighted and just around all of the Caribbean. They're just taking their orders from the global elites, from the WHO, and from the World Economic Forum, from the United Nations. They are just following policies. And that is why I don't like to speak just about Caribbean politics, because Caribbean politics has nothing. There's nothing in it to discuss, because they're just following diktats from multilateral organizations. They're not here running the show, right? Miss Kamala Person is not running the show. Miss Mia Motley, Andrew Holness, and Dr. Irfan Ali, and all of these prime ministers in the Caribbean are not running the show. And that is what we are talking about, not on this platform, that they're not running the show. And that's why we have to know the agenda from abroad and not from Parliament in Barbados or from in Kingston. Now, we have Steve Knight saying they have satellites that been doing that for a long time now. Wow. Can you imagine your house and you're being watched, you're being surveilled? Something that, but we should not be surprised, because who would really imagine that the days in which you have to be even careful when you go to a public bathroom now, because people have cameras all on them, you don't know if they're going to put you up on on YouTube or in on TikTok, right? So right now we don't have any privacy anymore, right? Isn't it sad? Now, the new electricity, that's WHD saying meter readers are very, very smart city oriented in TNT. Yeah, and I think everywhere now they have them. People think it's good because it helps them to read what their energy consumption is or wasn't, but it is also surveilling. Yeah, you're correct, WHD. So there are some things that we can say are convenient. But how do we trade convenience for our, what do you call it now, liberties? Can we do that? When did I stop here? I think it was here I stopped. And we have Trevor saying yes and become model citizens like many Caribbean people who know how to suffer silently, conform or both. And I think that we have to conform because I don't think we have to conform. It's just that we're afraid, right? We are afraid if we don't conform, the consequences that will follow. And as the workplace now becomes much more constricted and controlled, people are careful what they say because their bosses can suspend them from their work if they say too much and might say, well, you're bringing my company under disrepute and all of that stuff. So people are afraid. People in the Caribbean are sense, after COVID, I think we're sensing, we find that we are in a new era where we have to be silent. We can't be that talkative or vociferous. WHZ is saying certain areas along the east-west corridor of Trinidad and Tobago have water and electricity problems. It's true, right? So it might be some areas. I don't want to now say I've never been to Trinidad and Tobago. Let me just emphasize that. So I'm not saying point blanketly. I'm just saying that I've heard, people were responding and some people were saying that. Okay, so I don't know. So thank you for correcting me, WHZ. Now, Centian Prime is saying, WHZ, I don't doubt that I believe all these systems or we're ahead of themselves to be integrated into AI to track us and keep us in a subordinate system. Yeah, certainly it's going to track us, right? And they are already tracking us. Because do you notice here, and I'm looking at the algorithm, or when you're putting something in the chat GPT, it has this eye, right? It's like it's looking at you. It's this sort of thing that you really wonder if this thing is really watching you as you talk and as you interact with it. And I have no doubt that it is, right? I have no doubt that ChatGPT and that little thing that you see is processing there, and the eye that you see looking at you as an algorithm. You're looking at me right now, and I'm looking at you, right? That it is what it is. Now we have Sentient Prime. 2026 is all about implementing systems that could be integrated with AI systems for total control and education. I don't think they would be having data centers if it was not about control and surveillance. I doubt it, because what's the purpose of these data centers? And notice that they have all these cameras on these streets, right? You have the Jamaican eye. I don't know what they call it in Trinidad and Barbados. Do they call it the Barbadian eye too, where you have these cameras on the streets, and they see that they're, it's to protect citizens and to make sure if anybody is doing anything illegal, they can, apprehend them, whatever. And well, wow. Now, Stephen Knight is saying a lot of us should have paid attention to that book, 1984. And one of these days, we need to look at what's China's role in building these equipment too. Right? Because we often talk about the rivalry between the United States and China, but is China moving in that direction as well? China is already a surveillance state, by the way, and lots of what the West is trying to catch up with in terms of surveillance, China is way ahead. Way ahead. So when we're just looking at these little surface level wars and between China and the United States and all of that stuff, their agenda is similar with regard to surveillance and control of the populace. Very important that we understand that. All right. But one of the things I also find amazing with our leaders, they're cunning. So right now we see China doing well economically, better than the West, right? And we can't deny that. But is it that they're doing that deliberately so that people can be sympathetic toward China and say, well, at least China is a surveillance state, but they're doing well economically, so I'd prefer to live well and be watched. Something to think about, right? Because there's a lot of contradictions in our world now. I really wonder, because China is at the center of the surveillance state in the world. Now, all these AI data centers are foreign entity, correct? They are. And that's what I'm going to try to invite. I'm not sure if he will be able to come, but there's a Trinidadian living in the United States, and he wrote beautifully about it. And I think that we would want to hear from him. I think he's into technology himself, and I would like to hear from what he has to say about that. But he's urging Trinidadians, his compatriots, to be careful. And he was saying the same thing as you're saying, Sentient Prime, that they're all foreign owned. Trinidadians don't own these companies. Now, Trevor is saying most corrupt leaders won't put aside a money laundering opportunity, so they will have them in every country, collect, store, and sell your data and use it against you. Now, I've always been, curious as to how they use our data. Notice also that they're talking about AI also being able to hack your bank account. So maybe one day you wake up, and that has been happening frequently in Jamaica, by the way. I've heard Jamaicans saying since last year or the year before that there are people all the way from Saudi Arabia and in the Middle East who are actually doing transactions with their bank cards, all the way from the Middle East and some other far-flung countries. Now, is AI facilitating that process? And will we see where eventually we'll wake up one morning and see our bank accounts lower than what it should be? And they're going to blame it on AI. This AI thing is really, really dangerous, and is something that we have to watch and be careful of, right? Because we have ChatGPT in our homes, and people don't understand how ChatGPT probably can, well, they know your location and can cause criminals to come into your house, and the Caribbean is already unsafe. The Caribbean is already unsafe, an unsafe place for most of us, not everybody. But particularly here, Trinidad, Jamaica, and other parts of the region, we know that they're unsafe spaces for the most part. And if AI is merged with the data centers, and then all of a sudden we see criminals coming to our homes because they know where we live, they know where we have our monies, they know where everything is placed. I mean, it is frightening. It is scary, right? And this is all about economic development according to them, right? This is economic development. This is economic freedom. And we know if we don't have economic freedom, our liberties are gone. We have no liberties. There's no independence if you are independence on them. And they're putting us in dependence on their whatever they want to do, on their shenanigans. Trevor is saying many are cowards and may bite their tongue to protect their loved ones, jobs, etc. But that's a short-term relief and a long-term payment at a way higher cost, which they don't know because people only think short-term. That's why your problem should be our problem. The point is that, when people stand out, then they lose their jobs, and then we don't help them. And then, people are saying, how am I going to live? And, it's easier said than done. And that is what the problem is, that people say, well, if you chat too much, right? You chat too much. You must keep by your mouth, as they would say in Jamaica, right? Stop talking a lot because you would have had your job, Alexis, welcome to the live. Wuhan was heavily controlled and monitored during COVID. There are many anecdotal stories of people who were defied. Correct. You're correct. And I like that what you're saying, Alexis, because sometimes what we see in the media, and thank God for social media to an extent, because people do register their complaints so you can go to TikTok now and YouTube videos, and there are lots of videos where people are speaking out against these data centers and other things that bother them. So you're right. I agree 100% with you, Alexis. Now, Trevor is saying open AI and social media, etc., plays a huge part in the data business, right? So people say it's free, similar to a job. It helps with our convenience, but you're selling yourself into slavery and demise. Now, what is interesting, if you notice, every document you click on now, even a PDF document or just a simple, what you call it now, newspaper article, you have to say whether or not you are a robot. And it's annoying, because sometimes they're telling you, oh, can you tell what's a car from a whatever they have there for you to decipher, for them to decipher whether or not you're a robot. So everything we do now, we have to decipher whether or not we're a robot by giving over our information and our data to them. Every article I'm reading now is annoying. You have to say whether or not you are a robot or you are a human being. Weird, right? It's weird, but it's true. Trevor is saying it's modern day buck breaking and an open whipping, just in a different way. If you show defiance, then of course they're going to, tighten the button on you. We know that that's what they are about, right? We know that is what they are about. And we've got to, what are we going to do? What are the solutions to the problem? I would begin by saying one of the solutions is to educate ourselves about the problem, right? And to expose what the agenda is for our region and for the world at large. If people don't know the agenda, which many don't want to know, and that's why many people were deceived by COVID, if they had been reading before and understand how this was interlocked and science and all these things, then people would not have made the decisions that they made, the unwise decisions that they made. But do you notice that people only cry when they have been burned. There's like a baby wants to put his or her hand in the fire, and you're saying, no, Jimmy, don't do it, or no, Jane, don't do it. And it's only when they place their hands in the fire and they're burnt and they feel the pain that they realize and say, you know what? And they cry. And we as adults behave the same way. We don't want to hear these discussions, right? And then when it comes upon us and the pain that we have to go through, everybody wants to come on the live and they're scared and they want to have a conversation when it's too late, right? After the vaccines have already destroyed your bodies, right? And this is a vaccine. This is a vaccine that we have now to deal with the whole matter of a surveillance state, right? And they are inoculating us by indoctrinating us to believe that, oh, crime and violence is high, so we have to surveil you, right? Because if you don't give us the authority to surveil you, we can't protect you from the criminals. Climate change, the storms are coming for you and they're going to kill you. And if you don't allow us to implement these changes and these climate change policies, then you are going to die, right? And people say, oh yeah, please, we don't want to die, right? And that is what we do, all right? Sad. Then Marie is saying all politicians, they're all corrupt, and it's just what they are. Only for a few, we must say a few still, so we don't want to, but there are few but they are in the minority. They are in the minority, and not in the majority. Trevor is saying, yes, the capture right is what you're talking about, to verify if you're a human. That too, like many more things, help to train the AI freely and openly, but they say it's used for your safety. Correct. About, almost every other article, including, magazines and also newspaper articles that I used to read before without having these things. Now I've got to, and sometimes it's annoying because you're saying this and it's saying no and verify, and I'm like, come on, I don't see any more cars. And let me read the article. It's amazing that we have to do so many of these things to be able to survive. But this is the modern world that they say that we are living in. Now, this was a very interesting conversation on the cost of living, and it's something that is going to have very serious implications for us onward, right? The fact that we are living in economies that are not functioning. Our leaders are telling us that they have to do these, implement these policies, including, flooding our countries with immigrants when we can barely survive. And people are just thinking that these are going to work. And I'm saying, how is it going to work? I mean, if we were prosperous, by all means, send all the Africans and the Filipinos, whatever you want to send, the skilled laborers, send them to our countries, so we can grow. They're telling us just by having them here and without us having nothing, we can grow. That's the way to grow the economy. Oh, I don't understand that. And if that is not religious to me, you tell me what is religious. That to me is faith, blind faith, that you believe you're going to just, import some Africans or Filipinos or wherever they're coming from into these countries, and then the economy is going to miraculously grow. To me, that is Sunday school, right? Sunday or Sabbath school. That to me, that is not real economics. It's not scientific. It's irrational. It is delusional, and it is utopian ideas. It cannot be real. It just is not real. Okay, so we have, it's like they're trying to follow, Stephen is saying, the model in the US, flood the country of immigrants and things going to be all right, and it's not true. It can't be all right. As we're saying, the rational thing, Stephen, is that if your economy is really growing at a fast pace, people are working, and there's some, vacancies in some career choice that you might not find in the United States or in Barbados or in Trinidad, then you can send for these people. Nothing is wrong with that. We believe that. That is how, societies have always been. And we endorse that sort of rational thinking. However, if most of your citizens are barely living and they're complaining that they can't find jobs, how are you going to call for people abroad to come in and then miraculously the economy is going to grow? That to me is mental. They're demented. Something's not right with them, right? But the thing about it, I can't blame them, because most citizens are now saying that they want that because they're African brothers and sisters, and we want to, welcome them to the Caribbean. As if we don't have Africans here. There are Africans in Trinidad. I've seen Nigerians and people from all over Africa who are Trinidadians who have been living in Trinidad for a long time. The same thing in Jamaica and Barbados, I'm sure. But we are not saying anything is wrong with our African brothers or any other people living here, okay? It's because the Caribbean is a multicultural environment, and we've always had people from different parts of the world who have lived here, right? And we have no problem with that. But it's the rationale of the policy. It doesn't make any sense. Trevor is saying the reverse psychology is intense. If you speak out, they will say you're fear mongering, while the leaders and news media is terrorizing you daily. Now, it's not only that you're fear mongering, you are a racist, because people have left this channel because they don't think I'm pro-black, and their understanding of being pro-black. I'm pro-black, but not in the way they're pro-black, because I'm not living in theory, right? I'm living in the reality. Right, and I know that I don't have to wear an African badge on my shirt that I'm African or of African descent. People know that. They look at me and they know that I'm of African descent. I don't have to wear that on my shirt every day, do I? But many people have to wear it, and some of them don't even mean Africans well, because if you mean us well, you talk about these things. Because if we don't hit back against what they're doing, then both Africans and Caribbean people are going to be more impoverished. So we love our African brothers and sisters. We love our Caribbean citizens. And that is why we are speaking out the way we are speaking out. The ones who remain silent and the ones who want to ingratiate Africans by saying we love you, so you should come here. Okay, well, to face poverty? I don't know. Now, Marie saying, I never understood fully the reason that the UN promoted the influx of Venezuelans into Caribbean islands, right, with such enthusiasm, because that's what they're doing. They're trying now. If they can do that, then we can deflect, and the problem is not going to be talking about economic policies and the lack of solid economic policies as the Trinidadian guy did. Now, this Trinidad guy that I showed you in the beginning of the program, he gave probably one of the most, it's brief and highly intellectual, but the people just signed out because, I can't bother listening to him. And what he had to say was really on spot, brilliant, but people don't want to hear that, right? They just want to hear, Kamala doing something, or you're against her, or you're for her, and that is what makes you go on alive, right? When we have to discuss very intellectual stuff. So yes, they're doing it because if they can blame the immigrants, right, or have us blame the immigrants and not them, then they have won their objective, right? So now is the Haitians, is the Venezuelans, is the Africans, is Nigerians, is the so very soon that is what you're gonna hear in Barbados. Is the Nigerians, it's the Ghana, the people from Ghana, it's the whoever, the Jamaicans or whomever is there. That is going to be the new mantra in Barbados, as you have the Venezuelans in Trinidad, and the Haitians in the Dominican Republic, and in Bahamas. And Marie's saying there seemed to be a hidden agenda. I think that agenda I think it's an open secret now, Marie. I don't think it's no longer hidden. It's open, because we're seeing where it cannot be that having many Venezuelans in Trinidad is going to help Trinidad to grow. It's vice versa. It's not going to help the Trinidadian economy to grow. And we're not suggesting here that Trinidadians must not love their Venezuelan neighbor. They should, and should embrace as many as they can. But what we're saying is not fair to the Trinidadians and Tobagonians for the U.S. to have destabilized the country that is oil rich, just as Trinidad is oil rich. And if the oil, profits were going in the right direction, then they could be able to survive in their country. And I'm sure Venezuelans did not want to leave their country. The two countries speak two different languages, right? And they have two different cultures. So the fact of the matter is that people prefer to stay in their country. Some will not opt to go to Trinidad and Tobago. I'm sure they would. People have always, and you and I have lived in other countries. But the fact of the matter is that to have these forced migration as they're doing, forced labor because of the destabilization of these countries, which they're the ones who induced in the first place, then how can you blame us? when we are not doing well. You can't blame us, because I can't come to your house if you don't have anything to eat, or you just have limited things to eat. I can't. You don't allow me. You understand? You can't come. I would love you to come, but I don't have enough food for you and my kids, right? That's the rational thing to say, right? You want to help, but your family comes first. And then after, if there's any leftovers, then you can invite all the strangers to have them partake of some of the dinner, right? That's what people do. That's what rational people do. Now, Trevor is saying right now, Congress is exposing the vax with Senator Ron Johnson. Even England and other parts of the world are exposing the turbo cancers and additional problems. Same channel as lockdown, but fake now. Yeah, I heard Drew, that's Drew. And what's his name? Drew. They call him the doctor there, Dr. Drew. I saw Dr. Drew this afternoon, and he was asking the question, why is it that they're still promoting the vaccines when they have they have other drugs, right, that they can, use to treat the illness? And the answer by his guest rather was because they have contracts. So the contracts have already been signed, so they have to promote the vaccines still, because there are people that they owe lots of money, because they thought that this thing would have continued, and it didn't. Or they thought somehow people would not have been healed, and people were healed without the vaccines, right? So they're now trying to, see how much they can be more aggressive so they can get people's contracts, be honored, That's what it is. Even this climate agenda, they'll do anything to make us fair so that the climate agenda will be implemented. That was just a side note, yeah. But no, you're right, and it's all interconnected, Trevor. Everything that is happening now is just ridiculous, because the same thing happened during COVID, and COVID was also financial, right? It was economical. What they did relied more on economics rather than, medical health. It had nothing to do with our health. It was more economics. So you're right. It's not even a side note. It's real. It's real economics. Stevens is saying, don't forget the UN says that China is the model country. They're trying to get us like China, right? So that's why we can't. And not that we can't say if the US does something against China that is incorrect, we can call that out. Nothing is wrong with that, We just, if the US gets up tomorrow and bombs China, it is wrong. It is wrong, and you and I cannot say that it is morally right. But at the same time, we have to say that we can't side entirely with countries, because at the same time, they all believe in the same, surveillance, climate change. I read an article at the beginning of the program. Those of you who weren't here, you would see that one of the Iranian oil and gas companies was mentioned as moving from, I think, 8 billion profits to 19 billion in profits, Iranian, during the war. And people would think, oh, it's US versus Iran. But you have all of these major oil and gas companies from all over the world, BPs and all of them, in the US and in Saudi Arabia to Iran, right? And they benefited economically from this war that is being waged right at this moment. Why do you think they're having this ongoing and off? They turn on the button, we have this 60 days, peace deal, and then they go back to striking each other during this peace deal, and then we have to make another 60 days. It is just ridiculous, and people believe what they're being told. People believe what they're being told. They think we need to stay. And as soon as I say on this channel, don't think that this is just a war against US and Iran, people gone, they just, let me sign up, because I am pro-Iran and I am on that side, and you will not do anything to separate me from being a strong supporter of Iran. But the oligarchs in Iran, right, are benefiting from the war. It sounds ridiculous. It sounds off. It sounds crazy. But that is how our elites behave. They have no respect for people but themselves and their monies. So they will even kill their children if they have to. It doesn't sound real. It sounds inhumane. It sounds off, but they do it. they do it because it's all about money. So if they will kill their children and their own citizens, what will they do to you? It's time for us to wake up now and understand that the economic disaster that we are confronting right now has been engineered. And I think that we should have learned that we're headed in the 2008 collapse of the financial meltdown, okay, in which Barack Obama, the same people on Wall Street that caused the economic meltdown, he bailed them out with taxpayers' money. They caused it, no, they were the culprits, yet he bailed them out. And from that time, the global economy has been going down and down and down, but they have been trying to pump it up with some voodoo economics. But how long will this voodoo economics work? How long will it last until everything collapses right before our eyes? This economic ecosystem, financial structure, landscape, whatever you want to call it, is not going to last forever. And it's about to collapse right before our eyes. Are we willing to make the sacrifices? Are we going to continue to still think in a delusional way that our leaders, the powers that be, our economists are going to push us out of the dangerous, cliff that we're about to fall over? I mean, they're not going to be able to do that. They don't want to do that because it is intentionally engineered so that they can surveil us, so that they can control us, and so that we will once again become their proud slaves. And I think that a lot of times, can we blame them entirely? No, because we do not want to educate ourselves. And if we don't educate ourselves this time around, in Africa, they forced them. They went to the transatlantic slave trade. They forced Africans to come here. It was forced labor. Now, we're not being forced. We are gladfully, we are joyously entering into a new era of slavery voluntarily, because we fail to educate ourselves about how the world operates. And the fact that this is a criminal organization, it's a criminal economic system designed that way, and it has to go down violently. It's not going to go down in a nice way. People are going to protest eventually. They're going to realize that their leaders have betrayed them. How could it be when you wake up and see that Iran and some of their oligarchs are involved in the Iranian war and are making money from it? It's painful to bear, right? It doesn't make any sense. Yes, it doesn't make any sense, but it is the reality. Why would they create COVID knowing that the economy would have also, fractured and would have suffered? Hundreds of people would have died, but they did it. The same with the V's, and they did it, and they knew it. They knew it. And all of these countries, whether it's Iran, it's Cuba, it's Russia, they were all on board with the COVID agenda. They were all on board. But yet they're fighting and we're taking sides. Whose side are you on? Are you on the side of the reigning elites? Because they're the ones who control the narrative coming from the media houses, right? They're the ones controlling the narrative. Or are you on the side of humanity? And like us now, we are now trying to make sense out of nonsense. So that's why we are not on their side. We can talk what is not right. So if the US is doing something against Iran that is not right, we should, because the people in Iran also are innocent. We're not looking at the Iranians, the ordinary man and woman in Iran. We're talking about the oligarchs who are benefiting, not the people of Iran. And these are the people we should be saying no, but we're not going to support their leaders. I am not. Part of the same corrupt system. Okay, it is corrupt. and it's more interconnected. And money connects it, not religion, not science. It is money that connects them, that makes them work together. Let me see here. Why can't click on your thing? Trevor saying people are just waiting to be told when to fight the immigrants, just like lockdown, right? Fear this today, react like that tomorrow, do this now. Wonderful human hacking simulation, and we're surrounded. By the way, this is a perfect analogy. Why? Because when we should be looking to at Dr. Fauci and looking at, what's his name? Donald Trump and the other one that came after Donald Trump, first term, the Bidens and all these people, China and these oligarchs, right? We were directing our anger to our neighbors. Oh, wear your mask, wear your mask. Don't come back to my place if you don't wear your mask, right? And our anger, people, if you weren't wearing a mask, they would think you are the one prolonging the pandemic. Do you know how many people told me that? And they cursed me out. And when I went to a supermarket one day, and this doctor, who I knew very well, asked me if I'd taken the V. And I told him no. And he cursed me out and brought all the attention of the people in the supermarket against me, almost like he wanted them to put me out of the supermarket. Because he's saying, how dare you? How dare you not take a very important medicine to shorten the life of the pandemic? And this was a doctor. So the fact of the matter is that in his mind, Dr. Fauci was the benevolent person, while I was the enemy of mankind. And the fact that Dr. Fauci and the doctors and all of the people in authority wanted to shorten the life of the pandemic, and they wanted to make us well. When I knew that they didn't want to make us well, they wanted to make us sick. Because when we're sick, we have to depend on them to heal us. And it costs money. And people are making hundreds of thousands of dollars from your ill health. And people don't know. And it's sad. Now, Trevor is saying, Santian, you're not alone. Keeping track. Many are still paying the price while they bury their heads and listen for sweet lies by who are verified in their own eyes. Yes, it is true. And this is what the connection we're here making. Don't forget the purpose of inflation was to bring us to this point, right? Once hyperinflation hits universal basic income will be established. Putting in the same amount of work for less, you're saving rather. And it is true because when we think about the migration it's going to cause hyperinflation. Migration of these new to be immigrants to the Caribbean. Remember when I told you about, we saw the video. I showed you the clip of the nurse in Jamaica who was talking to the Prime Minister and said, when the Prime Minister said, oh, I've always thought we had shortages of nurses. And she is the president of Nursing Association. And he said, yes, to an extent, but no. She said that there are many nurses in Jamaica who are without jobs. Yet the Prime Minister is thinking of, importing lots of nurses from Africa when there are nurses in Jamaica who are without jobs. Now, does that make any sense to you? Doesn't. Now, Alexis is saying, thank God for death and destruction. To some extent, yes, we have to thank God because some people suffered from the vaccines. Trevor, Alexis, many people won't understand what you just said because the demons also say they believe in God too, but the pandemic shows that most people are truly ungodly and idolaters. During the pandemic, Trevor, that there is a lady called Naomi. What's her name again? Naomi. I forgot her last name, but she said that she was an atheist. She studied at Oxford University. Very brilliant American journalist and writer. I think she used to work in the Clinton administration. And she went on many programs during the pandemic. And she said, I thought I never wanted to think I would ever say that the Bible and religion are true or there is some spiritual warfare evil going on in the world. But she said, having lived through COVID, having lived through COVID and the evil, you just cannot describe it. And you can't describe it in any other way but evil. What she witnessed, the level of wickedness, right, was out of this world. And she said that she has to reconsider. I'm not sure if she's converted, whatever. That's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying here to you is that she understood that human beings live more in what is called the physical realm, that there is a spiritual realm, and she could only, having examined what was going on, and she has written books on it. Her husband worked in the intelligence, center in the United States, so she has direct knowledge and access to information, to intelligence, right, coming out of the U.S. And Naomi Wolf, right? And she was saying that she was never a person who believed she thought that this was just mumbo jumbo nonsense about spiritual whatever, right? But she said she's reading. And that lady is so humble that I sent her a book that I consider to have been a good book for her to read. And she accepted it and said she had read it before too, and she was reading at the time. But it's just the humility, because this is a bright lady. Oxford, she was on what do you call one of those scholarships. What do you call it again? The guys who go to Oxford, the Rhodes Scholarship, right? She's a Rhodes Scholar, right? So she's no ordinary dull woman. We can say, oh, she's simple-minded, whatever. She is a brilliant woman. The way how she speaks, the way how she writes, okay? But she herself had to re-examine this entire wickedness that took place in 2020 and beyond. Trevor saying, exactly, Andrew, the immigration will trigger hyperinflation. I'm glad you understand. I hope more people see this. I hope so, because we're not, again, saying we're anti-Africans. Let me see that, because some of my former followers are telling me that, oh, why aren't you talking about the Chinese? I have spoken about the Chinese on many platforms. If you're listening to my videos, I told them I talk against what is happening with the Chinese too. I'm not anti-Chinese, but how they're doing it with the Chinese investment and, and how they're going about it, no, I cannot endorse it. And they're giving away prime lands and all of that to them. And, no. Right? No. So it's anybody. It could be my own family who doing the wrong thing. I'm going to call them out and say, you're doing the wrong thing. So it has nothing to do with blacks and Chinese and whatever. Greetings, Brother Demont. I haven't seen you for some time. Welcome to the live. Glad to have you here. We have, everybody's hitting up Pedro. Then we have Sentient Prime saying we all got to embrace ourselves, or we've got to embrace ourselves at some point in time for things to go sideways because protests don't work. And that's what I'm saying, don't work anymore. And I'm happy you're saying that. What works is when we're educated and we can say no. Because if 70% of the human populace had said no to COVID, it could not have been successful. It could not. I am understanding too, and from Naomi and other people, that when it first came out, our leaders, particularly in America and other parts, did not know that we were going to comply. It was an experiment. Do you know that? When they saw that we actually complied, they said, well, let's go for it. Let's get into it now and force them, right? And they were correct. We were that pliable. What if we weren't pliable, right? Then they couldn't do it. They would not be able to do it. And that's the whole purpose of education. That's what we're about, having these discussions. So when we see things now coming and say, be careful, this African immigration thing is not what they're telling us. It sounds good. It sounds like we should embrace our brothers and sisters, but it is much more than they are saying. Just like COVID, it's a virus and we want to get people, better. And that was not true. That was to make us sick. It was intentionally designed to make us sick, right? Just like how Trevor is saying, this immigration thing is intentionally designed to create hyperinflation, which is going to destroy our economies. Because, Jamaicans going to Barbados cannot bring back health to a Barbadian economy. That is rubbish. The Barbadian economy and Jamaican economy, we need what? Industries. We need to resuscitate industries, domestic industries, not foreign industries too, domestic industries, Trinidadian industries, Barbadian industries, Jamaican industries, local industries. Then we can say, wow, they're moving in the right direction. Wow, yeah, that's the direction. Now, having done that, if we now get back on track to where we were some years ago, then we can think of, importing our brothers and sisters from Africa. We'd love to have them. We don't hate them. We love them. And we want to help in any way that we can. But suggesting that they're going to come here and they are going to resuscitate and create economic growth for whom? Economic growth for whom? Certainly not for the people. Pedro is saying they knew what fear can make people do. Yes, they do. And they understand that. And that's why they had to put in the fear. I mean, it was night and day. These people went into creating fear during the pandemic. Night and day. It was nonstop. And how many people died in New York, and how many people died in California, and they were just, and you saw the level. And do you know that there were YouTubers from America who were saying that there were hospitals that they were showing that were supposed to be should have been in the United States, but they were in Europe. So America was showing us, hospitals in Europe pretending that it was in some state in the United States. That is a level of dishonesty that they practiced during COVID, and people believed them. People believed them. Now, Stephen Knight was saying it's like they're trying to replace the native population with people who are going to get along with the BS. I think that's what they're trying to do, because if they're not from there, they won't feel invested, right, in standing up to the powers that be and saying, no, I remember Barbados 10 years ago, 20 years ago when things were much better. They can only respond to what they're seeing now, but they don't know the Barbados or the Trinidad of yesteryear. We have that collective memory. They don't. And we have that blood. We have that connection, no matter how much we talk about our countries, but we have a connection, a physical connection, a spiritual connection, an economic connection to our different islands, wherever we are, whether you're in, on Jupiter or you're in California or wherever you find yourselves, you have a spiritual connection. And that is why you read the papers every day. Right? You read, I want to read the Barbados today because I want to know what's happening in Barbados, even though you're all the way in California. Right? That is that spiritual connection that you have to your motherland. Now, that's why the term flood the zone, right? Flood the zone. And they create this all sort of nonsense and people believe them. And you know what I did? I turned off my TV. People, you didn't see it? I said, I don't know. No, I'm not watching them, because I know what they are going to do. By the way, do you know that they practice voodoo and these things on the television too? That the more you watch these things, they can enwrap you into what they want you to know. It's mind control. Do you know that? The more you watch the news, they can actually alter your consciousness. They have the psychology and the spiritual, whatever they do, the voodoo thing that they do. It's not only in economics, it's also in social media, it's on these mass media, right? They can do that. And that is why when these things are happening, turn off the media. Don't listen to them as much as you can avoid listening to them, because the more you listen to them, you can be saying, you know what happened? It's really bad. And you might think that I have to go and take that thing too. Because when they're finished with you, you're going to be convinced. And they have all the props. And now with AI, what if AI was even refined as it was now during the pandemic? And maybe it was to some extent. We don't even know what we're seeing on nowadays, if it's real or it's unreal. So when the AI is also put up on the TV and you're seeing lots of thousands of people dying when they're not real people, how are you going to respond if you're not having these conversations? But people don't want to hear these conversations, right? Because it's speculative to them. Even though we have seen this before, right? You're speculating, Andrew, aren't you? We have Trevor saying Stephen is right. Many foreigners in Barbados worship Motley, but they, hey, I think they believe it's fair trade, a vote for financial opportunity. Yeah, she's eloquent, and she knows the narratives, and she speaks it lucidly. People can understand. So people all over the world like her. In the global south, specifically, they like her, and they say, wow, we wish you were prime minister here. We want you to come to our country. And I'm like, what is she doing for Barbados? Sentient Prime, at some point, the conscious ones who are seeing this unfold before their eyes going to have to brace yourself to the reality that things are going to go sideways at some point or the other, and protests don't work. Only if they will know that it is the protests and shouting and screaming. All they do is send some police and they just beat you and send you back home, right? Just give you some licks and you cry, and they probably put you in prison and you come out the next day. They will let you out, right? So it doesn't work. Doesn't work. The neuralist programming coming through the television, right? What they call it, the neuro programming. There's a word for it. You're right, neuralist. There is this Neuralingo. Is it Neuralingo they call it? Yeah, something of the sort. Programming in which they use it, and they use a lot of props. But now, as I'm saying, AI can do that. What they would perhaps not be able to do, they can use AI to do that now, and AI will generate, hospitals that don't exist with hundreds of thousands of deaths, and people will think it's true. So that's it for tonight. I don't think the algorithm is interested in sending the thing out to any more people. So I think that we have covered quite a bit tonight, and it's something to chew on. Make sure you like the live and you share it with other people on the platform. Tomorrow we'll be dealing with the whole matter of our Caribbean and African people. Are we one people, right? Or are there nuances? Are there differences, cultural identity, identity issues or identity differences? Because we are hearing that we're all one. Even the Caribbean too, we're saying we're all one people. Are we just one people, or we have different identities too? We have to discuss these things. We know that we're different in many ways, but similar in many too. But sometimes we tend to listen to what the scholars are saying, and everybody's saying that we are one. Are we really one? And what do we mean when we say that we are one people? Okay. Do we have do we eat the same foods? Do we, practice the same religions? All of these things we will talk about tomorrow. Yeah, it's a good topic, and it's timely because, we're coming here, and I want you to come with your varied opinions, and nothing is wrong if you disagree with any of us on the platform, because that's what we're here about. It's a debate. All right. You're not coming now to say that your opinion is right and my opinion is right. We're coming here to have a debate, a discussion about what you think. So even if I disagree or you disagree with me, let's air our differences, because that's what it's about, so we can learn from each other, because we have to talk about that, because this new world order thing, they're making it sound as if we are all one, and so Africans and Caribbeans and everybody, Jamaicans and Trinidadians and Jamaicans and Barbadians are all one. And is that true? And why is it for that when somebody says, oh, are you Jamaican or are you Barbadian? We say, oh no, I'm this or I'm that. Because people like to be different, and nothing is wrong with difference. We can be different, and diversity attracts. That is what attracts. Why do you think a Trinidadian wants to marry to a Barbadian or vice versa? Because the difference is attractive to them, right? It's much more sometimes than that person being beautiful, the woman being beautiful, or the gentleman being handsome. Sometimes it's just attraction to a different style, a different way of behaving, right? That makes that person attractive. So nothing is wrong with our differences. Let us embrace our differences, but our differences should not divide us and make us become, so aggressive and, and hateful, right? It should unite us instead of trying to divide us. But if we fool ourselves that we're not different, just like a man and a woman, if a man and a woman fools themselves and say the man is not different from the woman, it's one human family, then something is wrong. Right? Something is wrong, and our society is going to implode. And that is what we're here to define. And that might be a very good narrative, a very good analogy when we talk about man and woman being the same, because even though we're human beings and we're equal, but we're not the same, right? We have differences, biological differences, many other differences too, okay, that we have to discuss. We're not going to talk about man and woman tomorrow. I just gave you that sort of analogy to say, let us view cultural differences and identity differences, even though we sometimes say we're Black or Indians or Syrians or whatever, are we the same? Even the Chinese person in the Caribbean that were, the other day I was pointing out a Trinidadian Chinese to an American, and he was like, oh, I've never heard about a Chinese in Trinidad. I said, there are many Chinese in Trinidad. But the Trinidadian Chinese would not be accepted in China as an authentic Chinese person. Do you know that? There are Jamaicans who have been to China, Chinese, and they were not accepted as being Chinese in China, their motherland, because they're Jamaicans culturally and not Chinese. Typically they look Chinese, right? But culturally, they are different, and the Chinese just see them as a foreigner. Don't even look at them, right? So that is what we're here to discuss tomorrow. We are unique, not one, right? And we can be one if we recognize our differences. Just like a man and a woman getting married, they are one, but they have to understand that they have differences. They have to acknowledge their differences. If they don't acknowledge their differences, the relationship will not last, right? It will fracture. Thank you so much for joining. I think we have exhausted the topic, and we don't want to chat until we don't have anything to say, and I'm tired. So we'll talk tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please come on time. Let's get to come on time so that we can get the live out, because the algorithm suppresses if you don't have the early response in terms of coming to the live on time. So please make it on time if you can tomorrow. We'll appreciate it, so that they can send out the live for a rather stimulating conversation we'll have tomorrow. Ciao. Have a great night, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.